Hey, what's up, everybody? How you doing? Welcome back to the Jesse Lee podcast. We got the main thing going on this time is the second half of my interview with John Harrison, composer, writer, director. He's been working on the new Creepshow TV show a lot, and that's what most of this interview is about. But we also just talk about horror movies in general and his career and history working with George Romero and Stephen King, and this interview part is in video, so it's a little more interesting. And I hope you guys really enjoy it, and keep an eye out for the Creepshow Holiday Special that's coming out 2 days from now, Friday the 18th, and then sometime this spring we're gonna have season 2 of Creepshow. Both of those are available on Shudder. So check those out. They're going to be pretty awesome, and I really hope you enjoy the second half of my interview with John. He's a really cool guy. Alright, enjoy. Alright, Mr. John Harrison, man.
How are you?
It's been a whole 4 years since we last talked. How about that?
Has it been that long?
I think it has, man. Time goes fast.
Well, I'm getting older, Jesse. I can't remember.
The only reason I even know that is because I remember when we were talking about the upcoming election.
Oh, back then.
Yeah, exactly. And
Well,
we all
we
know
got to
how
find a
that
better way
went.
to check in with each other, like instead of these 4-year intervals.
Yeah, I agree. That sounds good to me, man. Well, when we last talked, we covered a lot about Creepshow and Day of the Dead, and a little bit about you working with George and all that kind of stuff, and the Doom miniseries. So I figured now it would be a cool time to catch up on some of the stuff you've been doing lately. In particular, I'm really curious about Creepshow, the TV series, and
Yeah.
how you got involved with that, and did Greg, call you up and say, hey, I want you to be a part of this? How did that go?
Well, clearly you and your fans will know that I was involved with George in the original movie
Oh, of
and
course.
back in the day. And when Shudder TV started sniffing around about whether they could do a TV series, I had been in New York and I was having lunch with the president of Shudder, and he told me that they were trying to get it going with Greg Nicotero, who is
Whose idea was it to begin with? Like,
well,
who's.
I'm not really sure about that. I can't tell you that it was. I think it was probably a combination of a company called the Cartel,
Uh-huh.
which is the production company, and Shudder TV. Shudder was just coming on, and I think that their whole idea was to draw eyeballs to the new streaming service. And so whatever they could come up with in terms of well-known projects that could get people interested in the channel and become subscribers, even on
Yeah.
a free trial basis,
And
that was a money worth investing. So
original content.
Yeah, Creepshow is a great title.
Sure.
And so they said, look, if we can talk Greg into doing this and everything, would you want to, participate if you could? And I said, sign me up. So Greg and I talked about it. I was actually in Atlanta doing another show for sci-fi, and we went out to dinner because he was there doing Walking Dead.
What show was that?
That was called Superstition. A
Okay.
short-lived series. It was only one. It only lasted one season.
Okay.
But I knew the producer. He wanted me to come down and do a couple, and I did, and it was a lot of fun. But we had Greg and I had dinner together, and he told me about the new idea for Creepshow, and that was that. One thing led to the other, and once they finally put the deal together, they got me involved in writing an episode, and then I directed. Well, the way it works is that on the Creepshow TV series, there are 2 stories in every episode.
Yeah.
It's like an anthology.
Yeah, I watched the whole thing.
Did you? Did you?
Yeah.
Okay. So I did 2 episodes and 4 stories, and then I wrote one for another director.
Yeah, gotcha.
So that was last season, and it was a hit. It turned out great. People loved it.
Yeah.
And so, you know, they said, let's do another one. And so I just got back from Atlanta a couple of weeks ago doing my first episode for season 2, and I'm about to go back and do another one for season 3.
Oh, that's so cool.
Yeah, it's going to be great.
We're
We're really punching above our weight this time. I think it's going to be even a better couple of seasons than the first one, although the first one was great.
Awesome. Yeah, I'm really excited to see it. Do you have any idea when the season 2 is going to come out?
You know, it's right now with COVID having thrown everything out of whack.
It's pretty hard to say.
It's hard to say, but I think the first season 2, I think, is tentatively scheduled to be sometime in April, and then season 3 would be sometime this fall of 21.
Okay, wow, that's actually a lot sooner than I expected. Yeah, I mean,
it'll be 6 episodes in each again.
Okay, very cool. Yeah, because, you know, when I first heard that it was coming out, I have to admit I was a little bit trepidatious just because, you know, I love the original movies so much. I think it's like one of the best horror movies ever made, easily. And I think the second one is good, but, you know, not quite as good as the first. And I don't even want to mention Creepshow TV because that's not even really worth talking about. But
I don't know much about it. Yeah.
But when I started watching the show and I saw that Greg and you were involved, that gave me hope. And then watching the very first episode, it was really exciting to know that the first part was going to be an adaptation of Grey Matter, which is a great night shift story. And night shift holds a very special place in my heart because when I was like a little kid, it was my first exposure to Stephen King. I was really excited about wanting to read his books. I had just learned how to read, but, you know, it was the idea of reading a whole novel was kind of daunting. So that was a good way that I could digest stuff. And so seeing that was being adapted was really cool. And then having such amazing character actors in it, like Giancarlo Esposito, Tobin Bell, and the great Adrian Barbeau, of course, was awesome. And I thought it was a great you know, story and really well done and really scary. And I thought the effects were really good in particular.
Yeah, well, you know, with Greg doing it, you would expect that the creature effects would certainly be.
Yeah, you would hope so, right? Yeah. and yeah, certainly on The Walking Dead, he's always pulling off amazing stuff. And that's one of my favorite shows ever of all time, too. So I had a feeling it would be pretty great. And then the second short in the first episode was the first one that you directed, The House with the Head. And, you know, that's a really interesting and cool little short. And some of the things I really liked about it was I thought the little girl was an amazing actress. And
she was fantastic.
Yeah, and you don't see that a lot with little kids, you know, so that was great.
No, she was astonishing. She was probably, she was a better actor than anybody else we had on the set.
Yeah,
I mean, she just had that sense of it. She just knew. Now, of course, she'd been doing Walking Dead, so she was
Right.
very, and other things. So she was
Of
familiar with
course.
but she was,
That's what I know her from. She's
yeah,
Judith.
yeah,
Obviously, duh.
yeah.
But
So
yeah,
Greg was the one that said to me, "Look, John, I'm going to give you this little actress, and you should use her because." And man, I'm so glad that he did because she just killed it.
was she really easy and fun to work with?
Pardon me? She what?
Was she like really easy and fun to
Totally easy.
direct and work with?
Came completely prepared, and she had really good instincts. She would make suggestions to all of us. But it was really funny. One day she was talking, and while we were setting up the shot, and she was asking the cinematographer Rob Draper, "Well, where are you putting the lights on this shot? Where are you putting the camera?" It was kind of like she wanted to know everything about what we
All
were
the
doing.
technical details.
Oh yeah, and she was very aware.
That's so cool. Yeah, and it's a really interesting story, I thought, because for one thing, nobody dies in it, which is kind of unusual for a Creepshow story, and it wasn't really as much of a morality tale where the bad guys get punished. It
Right.
was,
No,
it
no,
was,
and that's what I liked about it, Jesse. I
yeah,
mean, what I really got into uh, with that particular story, whenever I'm doing one of these things, I try to find, if I've had a chance to talk to the author, in this case, Josh Mallerman, who wrote Bird Box,
okay.
I said to him, well, is there some symbolic meaning to the head? Is there some
That's what I
reason
was
why?
wondering.
And he said, "No, man, I just thought it was just an idea that popped into my head that this thing would be in, it would spook her, and it would just be a crazy, and it almost doesn't need any explanation." And I agreed with him about that. It wasn't like we needed some crazy backstory or anything
Yeah,
like that.
it's definitely very creepy.
But it's creepy just by itself, right?
Totally.
What I wanted to do with it was I thought it would be really great to make it more of a psychological horror story than, say, like a gruesome revenge tale. And so the way I got into it was to think of this young girl watching her parents go through the normal everyday struggles of living, paying bills, the stress of raising a child, of trying to figure out where they were going to make money and all of that, and transferring that to what she was doing while she was playing with the dollhouse.
Yeah.
And there is always a threat, something out there that a child would not necessarily understand. The adult tensions that are going on between a young couple with a child and money struggles and everything else,
Right.
and materializes this thing, the head, that becomes a threat to the family. So I played with that while shooting it. And so it's really a psychological study of this little girl trying to work stuff out by playing with her dollhouse.
Yeah.
And I thought it turned out pretty successful that way.
I think so too. And I think for me, the line that was the biggest clue about what was going on was the line that the guy in the toy store says about, children working out the issues and how adults don't really always know what they're actually thinking.
Don't tell you what it is they're trying to work out.
Exactly. And so that I thought was really cool, and that kind of gave me an idea of what might be going on. And the other thing that I really thought was awesome that I thought you brought to it directing wise, and you can tell me if I'm right about this being intentional or not, but it seemed like you both made a point to make the actual real house that they were in, that they were living in, look like a dollhouse as well. And
Well, it's interesting you should say that because uh, we didn't have the budget to build a dollhouse. I don't know whether you've been watching the latest version of The Haunting on
I had,
Netflix.
it's awesome.
So yeah, and in that one, of course, they have a beautiful dollhouse that is an
Right.
exact replica of Bly Manor.
Yeah.
We didn't have the resources to do anything like that, but our props guy, Lucas Godfrey, took me down to a shop outside of Atlanta where they had it was a shop totally dedicated to dollhouses and all of the things that you could put into dollhouses, the furniture and the little figurines and so forth. And we walked in and they had just gotten in from a private collector this dollhouse that the collector wanted them to sell on commission. And it we looked at it right away, and it doesn't really resemble the house that we shot at for the real characters,
Hmm.
but it was close enough.
I mean, I
And
thought it looked like it to me.
it did well. What we did was we went back, and also the thing that I liked about it, Jesse, was that it was opened on both sides, so
Yeah.
that I could open it on both sides, and I could take the roof off, so I could create all kinds of angles through it and looking down into it. And as I said earlier, I was trying to get into her head.
Yeah, I totally noticed, but that's the way you filmed it. And I
So
thought it was really cool.
I wanted to be inside the dollhouse looking at her, not necessarily just over her shoulder looking into the dollhouse. So we went back to the production designer who's brilliant, and she was able to dress the real house with some of the same kinds of things that we had in the dollhouse. And that's
Yeah.
why it looks the same. And if you look very closely, you will see some Easter eggs in the in the dollhouse, like on the living room coffee table is a miniature ashtray from the original Creepshow movie.
Oh, of course. Yeah, yeah, yeah. That
And
actually it shows up in a lot of the episodes.
shows up in a lot of them. But Lucas made this small, perfectly matched, tiny little ashtray that would work in the dollhouse. It was fantastic.
Yeah, I thought it turned out really well, and I really thought that the way you filmed the dollhouse from all the different angles, it just felt like I was a little kid looking into it myself, and it kind
Well,
of
that was
took,
the intention.
yeah, and I think it definitely worked. Um, Tell me about All Hallows Eve. I like that a lot too.
Yeah, that was a difficult one because it was written for 12-year-olds.
Oh,
And
wow.
again, with the resources and the time that we had to shoot these, it became very difficult. It's interesting that we shot House of the Head and All Hallows Eve together.
Okay.
When we got into post and we decided which stories went better with which stories, they took Hallows Eve and put it up on the first episode with Greg's first episode. But they were shot together, which meant we had kids in both episodes. And labor laws only permit you to shoot with underage children for so many hours a day.
Right, right.
Night shooting is particularly difficult, if not impossible. And so we had to figure out how are we going to do these two episodes because they both involved kids, and the only way we could kind of really work our way around it was to cast All Hallows Eves with kids that were over 18. So I had to make the argument to the network that we could make this work, that we would, and you know what the story is all about,
Totally.
that the kids were teenagers, but just had their own kind of club. They were kind of nerdy teenagers. So we could
Yeah,
say they were 14 or 15
it
years
looked
old.
like they were playing D&D.
Well, they were, once we were able to find kids that could sort of play younger, then it made sense. So we originally we're going to cast 12-year-olds, but that didn't work out. So
Gotcha.
there's a certain charm in the script, if you think about it, with 12-year-olds, that isn't quite the same as when they're older. But we just played with it. You have to, in those situations, Jesse, you just have to embrace it
And
and
go
go with it.
with it. Yeah, totally. Well, I thought it was a really creepy episode, and I thought that it was a very classic Creepshow morality tale. And it's funny, I watched Creepshow again last week, and after I finished watching it, I just was like, boy, Steve is really all about morality and the bad guys getting punished and the good guys might not always have a happy ending, but they usually get revenge or something. And it always seems like, I think a lot of people just brush him off as a writer because of the horror element, but in all his stuff, he's got a really strong message of good and spirituality and all that kind of stuff. And I think it's great. And that's one of the reasons I've always loved his work.
Well, it kind of goes back to the days of the comic books on which Creepshow was based. I mean, if you think back to
Yeah, all the EC
Tales of
comics.
Terror and the Vault and Tales from the Crypt and so forth, those were all morality tales.
Of course.
There's always doing something bad to somebody and getting his comeuppance very gruesomely by the end of it.
Totally. Yeah, I thought that episode was really good, and I thought it was really kind of creepy, and having these ghost kids that can't rest because of how they got killed was really creepy.
Yeah.
And,
It's no matter whether they're older or younger, it's a sad story.
totally,
And
totally.
so we made the character of Skeeter. We made him the older boy's brother, and that was an idea that I pitched to the writer, and he liked the idea, and that gave us a little bit more of an emotional tug.
Totally.
So we could cast him because he never really said anything.
Right.
We could cast him younger, and because he was always under a sheet,
right.
we could have 2 or 3 people playing him, so we were never in violation of labor laws.
That's funny. Yeah, but when you finally see his face, it's pretty damn intense.
Oh yeah, he was a great little kid. Yeah.
Awesome. So I'm curious. I really liked the episode that you wrote about the lady and her partner and getting trapped in the elevator with the dead body and all that. I forget the actual name of the episode, but
Lydia Lane's better half.
That's right. That's right. So
talk about a morality tale.
Yeah, no shit, right? Intense. So, what inspired you to write that?
Well, that actually came from an idea from Greg through his producing partner, Brian Whitten. We were having lunch in LA, and Brian said, Greg and I have been talking about doing an episode where it's just 2 people trapped in a singular space that they can't get out of, and one of them's dead. And that was all it was.
Wow.
That was the idea. So I started thinking, well, how could that work? What could it be? And the elevator just became the perfect vehicle for that. To be trapped in an elevator that was stuck in a blackout, and the person that's in the elevator with you is dead.
Sure.
And you murdered him.
And you killed him, yeah.
And you killed him. So that became the idea. But then, so I actually wrote a story that was pretty traditional. A guy and his lover, he's cheating on his wife. He tells her that they got to break up. She gets mad. He kills her accidentally, has to get rid of the body, and so forth and so on. And Greg called me and said, hey, listen, what if we made this 2 women? And it was more about 2 professional women. And the same story, but that becomes the motif. And I thought about it, and I thought, that might actually be 10 times better, much better. So I
Yeah.
went away and I wrote Lydia Lane and came up with her and her lover, who had been in line for this promotion but didn't get it and got really pissed off about it. And accidentally, as they're fighting and arguing, Lydia kills her. But now her whole career as this corporate executive is in jeopardy. So she's got to get rid of the body and tries to get it out of the building so she can put it in a car and have a car accident or something to explain it. The rest happens. She gets her just reward.
Yeah, she definitely does. Yeah, I was gonna say, I thought that the choice of using two women was a really interesting one, because, partly because you're a guy, and so you're writing from the perspective of women, and I think it's a really interesting theme to explore about how, women, especially in any professional or any type of situation where they're competitive,
Yes.
they should probably be trying to pull each other up and help each other out, but that doesn't always happen. And I thought that was really cool.
Yeah, everybody's human, and
Yep.
so that was definitely a theme we were playing with. I've taken a little bit of heat for having written it as a guy writing about it, but that just happens to be our culture these days.
Don't get me started.
I think imagination transcends sex. But anyway, we had a wonderful female director named Roxanne Benjamin who was able to really bring it to light, and so she did a terrific job with it.
I
thought it came off as authentic.
Yeah, I thought you all did a really great job, and I strongly agree with you. I feel like story and intention and writing transcends race, gender, all that stuff. And I think people are a little bit too hung up these days on who's doing what and where it's coming from. Because, I just personally feel that things change for the better the more that people are free to explore ideas and try different things and challenge
I would agree
each
with
other.
you. And I also feel that if you're pretty sensitive, you probably shouldn't be interested in the horror genre.
No doubt, you probably shouldn't be watching Shudder. I was just thinking about how impressed I am with how much they've done on that channel and how much they've stuck to their guns about showing things uncensored and unedited. I just the other night with my girlfriend watched the Cannibal Holocaust, and I'd never seen it before, and I've always been kind of scared to watch it. And I made myself sit down and watch it, and holy cow, that was not a fun experience. And it was grim, but it is kind of an amazing movie from a filmmaking perspective, and it was the first found footage movie ever made. So it was actually, there was a lot of.
I guess I didn't know that.
Yeah, it was definitely one of them, if not the very first. But boy, that was an intense ride.
Well, no, it's great, and they're doing a lot of other things with the channel, which I think will continue to be really interesting. And they've got great podcasts that, in conjunction with Fangoria and other
cool.
things.
I'll have to check that out.
And it's turned. I guess it's been pretty successful. And of course, Creepshow was a huge hit for them, so much so that the parent company, AMC, repurposed it for their broadcast, for their cable channel. So
Cool.
There's definitely a market for it.
Oh yeah, and speaking of AMC, have you seen the whole Eli Roth's History of Horror show? Because that's amazing.
You know, I've got to catch up to it. I am so far behind on everything,
I
Jesse,
can
because
imagine.
I've been traveling, we've been working, and I've got another project that I'm developing right now, and I'm just so far behind on everything. It's hard to catch up. But I have heard other people say what you said, so I got to check it out.
Yeah, it's that and the other show that they did with James Cameron about the history of science fiction films. I think both of
Yes.
those are
Yeah.
just amazing, and they've gotten such amazing people on there, and they talk about all kinds of awesome, like all of my favorite horror and science fiction shows. It's really cool to see a lot of that finally coming out, and there's also a great documentary called Summoning the Darkness, which is all about 80s horror movies. It's like 4 hours long, and they just talk about maybe 50 of the best 80s horror movies, and it's incredible.
I'll have to check that one out.
Yeah, you might have a lot, I think. So, yeah, speaking of projects that you're working on and you have in development, what's going on? What have you been working on?
Well, I mean,
Besides Creepshow.
besides Creepshow, I'm writing a podcast, believe it or not,
Oh, wow.
for Universal Music Group, which is an anthology of horror stories, which I've developed with the executive producer over there, a guy by the name of Daniel Sellinger. And
Wait, the
it's
radio shows?
it's going to be an anthology of horror shows, which will feature the talent of the Universal Music Group. So this is interesting, Jesse, because here I am writing horror stories for like 20 something rappers to star in.
Wow, wow.
And it's turned out really well. We're in production on the pilot right now.
Who are some of the rappers, if I may ask, because I'm a big hip hop fan.
Well, the first one is a new up and coming talent that UMG and Republic Records is really pushing. Her name is Baby Goth,
Okay.
and she's she's had a few hits. There's another group coming up. Interestingly enough, they're originally from Pittsburgh. They're called Social House, and they're going to be doing one of the episodes. We're currently talking to a rapper named Aminé about doing one. Let's see, who else is Young Gravy is another one that's talking about doing one.
Cool.
And let's see, Kiana Lede is thinking about doing one. So we'll see. I mean, I've currently written 3 episodes. I'm working on the 4th, and I think they're about to commission a 5th, and we're hoping for a series of 8. And it's anthology, so each one has its own story, and they're all music oriented. They're all horror stories about musicians.
Oh, that sounds really cool.
It will be.
So
and the great thing about it that I'm so excited about is that they're radio plays, so it's all about what you're hearing. It's all
that's what I was wondering. It sounds
it's not about the visuals. No.
Okay, that's so cool because I love old radio horror shows, and
yeah, man, and so it's going to really take you away. And there's new technology in terms of the headsets and what we can. It's like an advanced Dolby system that we're talking about using. Cool. And I mean, this is all in the works. This is not all definite yet, but when you have, for instance, like the headphones you're wearing, if you're listening to one of these shows, it's going to put you into a whole different space.
That sounds really exciting and really interesting.
It'll be cool.
I'm assuming that you're a fan of H.P. Lovecraft.
Yeah, I mean, it's been a lot. I mean, I've read a lot of Lovecraft when I was younger. one of the stories that I've done for this current season of Creepshow has a very Lovecraftian theme to it. And
For the new
I
season,
wouldn't say that I'm an expert on Lovecraft, though.
the reason I mention it is there's an organization group called the Interesting Lovecraft Historical Society.
Uh,
And they're online, and they make really amazing radio show adaptations of all of his stories.
really?
And they made about, I want to say, maybe 25 over the last 5 or 6 years. And they're all on the website. You can download them and check them
Oh,
out.
I'll check them out.
And I own all of them. I mean, I think they're that good. And they sell all sorts of Lovecraft related memorabilia. And they also have made a couple of movies. They actually made a full-length black and white adaptation of The Whisper in Darkness, which was
Wow.
incredible and really well done. And I love Lovecraft. I still read him a lot. And one thing that kind of bugs me is like how many times his works get turned into movies, and they're called H.P. Lovecraft movies, but 80% of the time they don't resemble the original story at all and don't have a lot to do with the Lovecraft mythology, at all. With the exception, I would say, of Dagon and Reanimator, obviously, that were both made by Stuart Gordon.
Well, I'm afraid that that's a common lament of, and Steve King would probably say the same thing. So many adaptations. I'm sure if E.A. Poe were still around, he'd probably look on in horror at some of the stuff. His stuff.
Although I will say they just made a new version of The Color Out of Space with Nicolas Cage that was actually very good and very surreal and very psychedelic and very cool. You should definitely check that one out. It's cool.
Right.
And honestly, I always keep hoping that Guillermo del Toro is going to finally one day make his big budget, R-rated adaptation of At the Mountains of Madness that he's been talking about doing for like 10 years now. Because obviously that will be amazing if that ever materializes.
Well, hopefully he'll get somebody to back him on that. That would be fantastic. He's one of my favorite filmmakers.
Oh, me too. I mean,
his early stuff is some of the best horror that I think is.
I totally agree. The Devil's Backbone and obviously Pan's Labyrinth, all that stuff. I don't think the guy has made a bad movie. I mean, even Blade 2 is good. Everything he does.
Oh yeah, absolutely. There's always something that's fascinating and interesting, and unique about his.
Totally. Have you seen The Strain, his vampire TV show?
Yes, I've watched it. I saw both seasons, actually. I didn't read the books. I saw both seasons. Yeah. And I loved a lot of it. Yeah.
Yeah, I thought it was amazing. And I thought the coolest thing about it was like, we've had enough of Twilight, finally there's like vampires that are actually fucking scary monsters that are frightening.
It's not a romance novel.
No, not at all. And I loved it. I thought it was good. And I'm a huge fan of Lost, and one of the writers of Lost was the guy that did it with him, and the guy that wrote the novel with him, they kind of did it together, and I thought it was amazing. And I'm still happy about the fact that The Shape of Water won Best Picture because, horror movies hardly ever even get nominated. And the fact that it won Best Picture was just so good. And not only was it like, a horror movie, it was a monster movie to boot.
Yeah, I mean, it's really ironic. George and I used to have this conversation. George Romero and I used to have this conversation all the time because we would walk around LA and try to pitch horror anthologies. And back in the '90s, it was still considered low rent.
Yeah, it was
It was
looked down
not
on.
considered yeah, it was a bastard stepchild, and now it's like it's all genre all the time, everywhere.
Totally, I know. It's really a trip how a lot of the things that I used to almost feel like I had to defend my love for it, whether it was horror movies or comic books or progressive rock, whatever, Now
Yeah.
all of those nerdy things that used to be kind of looked down on, there's like a total like subgenre and cult for all of it, and now there's like horror television shows all over the place, and it's kind of amazing and a dream come true for a horror fan like myself.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, me too. I mean, it's enabled me to keep working.
Yeah, I bet, and it really does seem like you're kind of having a second renaissance in your career, and at your age, that's nothing to sneeze at. That's really impressive.
No, I've been a very lucky guy, Jesse. I've been able to work constantly. I've always had interesting projects. I've had a few that I've not been able to get off the ground that I'd love to
Sure,
one
that
day.
always happens.
That always happens, but I've had a good run. I've been working constantly and have worked with great people, with Clive Barker, with George Romero, with Steve King, um,
Some of the
and
best in
now
the
guys that
business.
and now guys that came up when I was able to give them jobs back in the day, like Greg Nicotero.
Exactly. Sure.
All
Yeah,
great.
yeah, totally. And I just watched Dawn of the Dead for probably the 50th time 2 nights ago, and a couple big things occurred to me after watching it. And I think one of the things that really stands out about that movie that holds up over time and really says a lot about George as a director is that because he was independent, I feel like he was kind of ahead of his time in some of the ways that other independent filmmakers did the same thing later on. People like David Lynch and Tarantino, in that he was able to mix so many genres together. And what makes Dawn of the Dead so amazing is that it's not only an amazing horror movie, but it's also an amazing satire. It's also an amazing action adventure, and it's also an amazing drama, and it's so long and epic, and it kind of just gets to explore every crazy idea and whim that he had, and I feel like you didn't really see a lot of that with the whole genre mixing thing until later on with like David Lynch and Tarantino and Robert Rodriguez and guys like that. So
Oh yeah, it was hugely influential, and
totally.
it still holds up. I mean, it's still out there in theaters. The producer Richard Rubenstein has created a 3D version,
Oh
which is
wow.
really good, by the way. The movie is exactly the movie that George made, and it has the 3D elements to it now, but they are not in your face. They're not there just because of the
Sure.
trickery.
Yeah.
it's immersive and it works really well.
I'm actually, I'm a big fan of 3D, and I'm one of the few people that has a 3D TV and Blu-ray and
Really?
glasses and all
Wow.
that. And I'm kind of bummed that the technology seems to have kind of gone out of favor and it never really took off as much as they hoped it would. And there's only like a few people like myself that are really into it. But I've got like 40 or 50 3D Blu-rays, and I watch them all the time. When is that coming out?
It is. Um, no, I don't know that it's available on Blu-ray here in the States. I think it is
Oh,
in
huh.
um,
Interesting.
but
Oh,
it has kind of festival screenings theatrically. But of
well,
course, in this COVID world, that has been pretty
yeah,
restricted. So
unfortunately.
once we come through this, then it may be available again.
Yeah, hopefully sooner than later. Man, it's been an intense ride, that's for sure. And
Yeah,
very, very surreal as well.
yeah.
Well, speaking of movies and big movies, I'm really curious about the upcoming remake of Dune, and you being attached to that as a producer, and I'm wondering, even though a lot of people give it a lot of shit, I'm actually a pretty big fan of the David Lynch version, even though it, wasn't entirely faithful to the book.
Mhm.
I think it's visually amazing, and David Lynch is one of my very favorite filmmakers. I think he's incredible, and the soundtrack from Toto was good, and that was really cool. But I'm just kind of wondering what makes this new remake different, and what are you excited about for people to see? And just tell me a little bit about how you got involved in it and what you did on it and stuff.
I can't tell you too much because, frankly, my involvement was really involved in the early stages of the companies putting it together. I was not involved at all in the production,
Okay.
uh, and not at all in post or anything like that. But because of my miniseries, and because of Richard Rubenstein, the producer's involvement with that, he and I um, were attached through many incarnations of trying to put the feature project together, not for me to direct or me to write, but for us to be part of whatever team was going to be doing it,
Right.
because of the success of our miniseries.
Did it
And
go through other directors at first before Dennis got attached?
oh yeah, well
Okay.
yes, absolutely. Peter Berg was involved at one point.
That's
Pierre
right.
Morel
Wow.
was also briefly attached. Um, but we could never get the script right. And
Mm.
I was very adamant about certain scripts that had been turned in as really, as you were saying earlier, violations of the book in ways that I just couldn't support.
I
Um,
gotcha.
thing that I tried to do with both my miniseries, obviously, a book and a film are two entirely different things. And the film is an adaptation of the book, but there's no reason to throw the book out.
I
If
totally
somebody
agree.
wanted to make an adaptation of a book, there must be a reason, and that is that the book had some value to begin with.
No
And
doubt.
therefore, especially a book that is as beloved as Dune, the biggest selling sci-fi novel ever.
Totally.
So I wanted to honor the material, and because I love the material. So we went through a number of incarnations. Finally, Legendary ended up with the rights, and they were able to get Denis involved, and I was thrilled because I love his movies.
As do I.
And so I was really, the other thing that he decided to do, which I was very much in favor of, was to break the novel into two parts.
I,
Instead of trying to do, this was the problem I thought with David's movie, is that David Lynch's movie, he
had to cram everything into 2
it's
hours.
too big of a story.
Yeah, totally.
Two-hour movie. I was lucky, man. I had 3 movies to do the
Right.
one, and then I had three movies to do Children of Dune. So
Totally.
I had ample time to tell those kinds of stories. A 2-hour, even a 2.5-hour movie is just not sufficient. So I don't know exactly where Villeneuve is breaking it. But the fact that he's going to have the first movie be the first part of the book and the second movie being the rest of the book, I think is a great idea. I just hope, and from what I've seen, it looks fantastic. So the cast is great. So
yeah,
I'm really excited about
I'm
it.
excited too. The preview is really cool. What it looks visually amazing. And I actually didn't know that it was only going to be the first half of the book. And that's actually kind of cool, I think.
Yeah. I think that there's, I mean, when I pitched it to the networks and the producers, if you know the book, there are actually 3 books as part of the original Dune.
I read it for the first time 5 years ago, finally, and I loved it.
And so I was able to pitch it and say, well, look, we'll take each one of these books or chapters, if you will, and we'll make that a night. And it worked out perfectly in terms of telling that story. And so I had ample time. I don't know exactly where Villeneuve is doing it or how he's doing it, but I'm.
We're gonna find out.
I think it's going to be good.
Yeah, I think so too. And it's funny that you talk about adapted books and how movies and books are 2 different things. But I am a film major. I got my bachelor's in film here at UCSC a while back, and I'm obsessed with movies and books. And one of my very favorite novels series of all time. Honestly, probably my favorite. I've read it about 15 times now. Is the Dark Tower series by Steve. Have you read it?
Yes, but a long time ago. I have not seen the Idris Elba adaptation, though.
Well, let me tell you, I tend to be very generous in my reviews and critiques of movies. There aren't really many movies out there that I think are that bad. I tend to even think that most bad movies can be pretty entertaining, especially in the science fiction and horror and fantasy realms. But what really bothered me about the entire production of that movie was that instead of the studio, whoever developed it, actually having the guts to just say, okay, if we're gonna adapt the Dark Tower, let's adapt the Dark Tower and make the first book into a movie. The same way that they did with Harry Potter, and treat it like the actual source material that they're trying to adapt. And instead, they did this weird thing where they mixed elements of the first book with the 7th and last book. They didn't have any backstory about who Rowan was and how he became a gunslinger. So you really had no context for anything. And the Man in Black just came off as this kind of cartoonish, dumb character. And the whole arc of Roland and Jake in the first book, and Roland sacrificing Jake and letting him die so that he could, catch the Man in Black was like the whole important arc in that story, I thought. And by doing what they did, they ended up not only disillusioning and pissing off all of the hardcore fans of the book, but
Right.
they also made it impossible to understand for the layman too. So they kind
That's
of
the
ended,
risk.
yeah, they ended up kind of shooting themselves in the foot. And I keep hoping that someday a studio or a television network like HBO or Showtime will have the guts to just adapt the books as they are and tell the story that Steve had in mind. And just as a little aside, I actually wrote an adaptation of the Gunslinger, and I made it very close to the story of the book. I kept the dialogue pretty much exactly the same. I think it's like a pretty perfect book to adapt, because for one thing, the first book is it's only like 90 pages, so you don't have to worry about not having enough time to get the whole story
Right.
in.
Right.
The only thing I added to it was a little introductory voiceover at the beginning to just give a little context about what the Dark Tower was, who the Gunslingers were, what the world was all about, and all that. And who knows? Maybe someday I'll be able to give it to the right people and they'll pick it up. You never know.
Well, it's always a tricky business. I mean, I went into the Dune adaptations with a lot of trepidation on my own, but the first thing that I did before I started writing was I read the book and I chapterized the book in my own words. I sat down for a good month and would read a chapter, and then I would synopsize the chapter in my own uh, language, in my own memory,
Yeah,
so that
that's cool.
see what it was that Herbert was doing in each chapter. What were the themes? Where was it leading? What was the tone? And that actually helped me really know the book in depth before I
Sure.
wrote page one of a screenplay of it.
Right.
So anyway, it's a tricky business, and sometimes I don't know. An author, a writer reads a book or is given the assignment to do the adaptation, and he either doesn't like the book the way it's written or thinks he could tell it in a different way. I mean, as we've been saying, a film adaptation has always got to be different. Herbert's book is a perfect example of one or two major reasons why.
Sure.
He used a lot of internal monologue.
Yeah.
You can't do internal monologue. David Lynch tried to do it in his movie, but in my estimation, that's where the movie stopped all the time.
Right.
Because you would end up shooting close-ups of an actor and hear his voiceover telling you what he was thinking.
Sure.
I made a deliberate decision never to do that, and instead turn the internal monologue into external dialogue if it was possible to do it.
Right.
Or to find a setting that would explain what the character was thinking without having to just watch him think about it.
Yeah.
I mean, you can do that in a novel. You can get inside a character.
Exactly.
But you can't do that in a movie.
Yeah.
So there are certain things that you have to do in an adaptation.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean that you have to abandon the story.
Yeah, and it's hard to know like how much you should stay close to it or not. For example, Frankenstein, the movie, is nothing like the book, and that's an amazing.
Or is Dracula, the original.
I know it's Dracula, although the remake, the Coppola version is a lot closer. But, some of my very favorite adaptations of books are exactly like the book. For example, Fear of Living in Las Vegas comes to mind.
Yeah,
they just kept all of his dialogue right from the book.
And visually, it made you feel like you were in that.
It took me back to do an acid in Vegas. I'll tell you that. When I was 19, I did that, and it was quite a night.